March the 28th by the Finance Minister, Charles Sousa. The budget does have us return to a deficit situation from balance or even a small surplus. This year's budget will include a $6.7 billion deficit. So I wanted to ask you, how concerned is the province's business community about returning to deficit and this size of deficit?
Well, we're very concerned for a couple of reasons. One, deficits today are taxes tomorrow from our membership's experience, and this budget also includes another $500 million in taxes to small and medium-sized businesses over the next 3 years. And then it's several more years of more deficit, and where the biggest concern, Joe, is that this is late in the cycle. And even if you're a proponent of Keynesian economics, you use deficit financing to prime the pump when things are slow, but then you're supposed to pay back when things are good. And we've led the G7 and the balance of the country in growth, and so should be putting that down so that you have dry powder when you really need it. We're going into a period of significant uncertainty with respect to our trade relationships, with increased competition, with the move in the United States to significantly reduce corporate taxes. So many of the advantages we've been riding on are now at risk, and so now is not the time to double down on deficit.
Okay, fair enough. And I did a little bit of research on various jurisdictions. So Ontario now, its accumulated debt is sitting at around $325 billion. The size of the provincial economy is about $800 billion. So that's about a 38% debt to GDP ratio. Now, appreciating Ontario is not a country, it's a province, but is a 38% debt to GDP ratio necessarily bad or dangerous in your view?
This is the largest subnational debt in the world. I mean, bigger than California, which is a state that has the population the size of all of Canada. So it is worrying because you have provincial, you have subnational debt, then you've got the national debt. So from the standpoint of the taxpayer, splitting it up and saying, oh, not to worry here, at the end of the day, one taxpayer pays for all of them. So you have to look at the accumulated debt, and it does cause us significant concern.
Okay, and that's, I guess, layered on top of what the experts are telling us. There's significant personal and household debt. Now you've got provincial debt and national debt.
And let's remember, part of the reason that is where it is that we have historically low interest rates, which are now beginning to move up. The thing that has saved us from the standpoint of debt, even at this level, is these rates have been so low. And even at these low historical rates, currently just servicing the debt in Ontario is roughly $12.5 billion each year, just in interest. That is the third largest item in the Ontario budget. And think of all the things we could and should be doing with $12.5 billion if we weren't paying down interest.
Of course, healthcare being the biggest expense that the province bears, education being number two, and you're right, interest on the debt is number three. So you mentioned a moment ago that governments can go into deficits and debt during bad or challenging times, and the hope would be that as the economy stabilizes and grows, the government would start to pay down that debt. I recall when Dwight Duncan was the Minister of Finance, and you'll recall at the end of 2008, beginning of 2009, when it looked like the financial world was about to end, that in 2009, the Ontario government had a deficit in 1 year of $24.7 billion. It was huge. It was federal in its scope and magnitude. And yet, over time, it got reduced, it got lowered, and I'm thinking now, and that was $24.7 billion on a smaller budget.
Yes.
Our budget now is about $151 billion. So the world, I'm going to play devil's advocate with you for a second. The world didn't end. We came out of it okay. The province is still standing and not gone bankrupt. So Other than the actual principle or the thought of going into deficit is the size of the deficit. So 6.7 billion on 151 billion. Is that as bad as, say, previous deficits have been?
The issue is timing and context. Remember, he went into deficit at a time of incredible financial crisis. And arguably, and again, for those who follow Keynesian economics, those are the kinds of times, we don't have a position that says you should never go into debt. Businesses go into debt each and every day to invest in critical things that are going to help them grow in the future, but they understand that they can't continue to do it regardless of the cycle. And this is our biggest issue, is that you are now piling this on at a time when the interest rates are going up, when growth has been good, and when you want to keep dry powder. And it's not just us, Joe. What's interesting is, the Toronto Star, which has not exactly been known as the pro-business paper, in its editorial positions, including Martin Reg Cohen's recent column where he said, look, this is a combination of idealism and cynicism. It's good politics, but bad economics. And we echo that because it's absolutely the wrong time of the cycle to do it.
All right, fair.